So today we've got Pat Kelly back with us, and I brought Pat on a couple of weeks ago, gosh, probably 8 or 9 weeks ago when the whole coronavirus pandemic hit Whistler at least, and we were trying to get our heads around what was happening in the market up here and what was going to happen, and clearly nobody knows, but we've had a little bit of time since then to kind of digest some of the numbers and what's been happening with the real estate market in Whistler and Pemberton. And there have been some sales turning over and some things have definitely happened. And now that the cloud is lifting a little bit and things are reopening in the resort to a certain extent, including our office in Whistler Village, I thought I'd bring Pat back on and we can kind of talk a little bit back and forth about what we think the market's going to do and what we see the numbers doing right now as we move out of this. So Pat, I thought I'd just take it over to you. And so where are we right now with respect to the market in Whistler?
Thanks, Dean. I feel a bit like one of the repeat guests on Colbert. It's an honor to be asked back more than once. We saw a real significant drop in activity, right away. The volume of activity, I tend to focus on number of transactions rather than dollar values. But the number of transactions dropped by 50% from the month before, almost immediately. The interesting thing is that you might have thought that given that there weren't people coming to Whistler, that would start to worsen over time. And if we look at the number of transactions that have occurred in Whistler and Pemberton in the last 30 days, as compared to the 30 days before that, which would be immediately following the shutdown, it's basically unchanged. And not only is it unchanged in terms of the number of transactions, it's also unchanged in terms of value. And it's also unchanged in terms of dollars per square foot. Now, what has been selling? I think that there's been more focus on lifestyle properties. You don't see as many of the hotel rental orientated type properties or properties that are suitable for Airbnb selling. On the other hand, we saw a number of very expensive properties change hands at a time of the year that we don't normally expect that to happen. So, there still seems to be a tremendous amount of pent up demand for Whistler, particularly for unique or family orientated properties. The same is true in Pemberton. People are looking for acreages, they're looking for homes, which is consistent with a macro event that's happening across North America, where there is a move away from higher density population and higher density projects. So for instance, houses are now more popular. When you look at search engines, houses and townhouses are more popular. Low density townhouse projects are more popular than condos in internet searches. People are looking, it's almost an isolationist kind of thinking. Tempering that to some extent is the amount of media coverage that is creating the expectation of what I call needs-based decision making. And when I say needs-based, it's I need to sell. And the expectation that kind of selling will be significant in the marketplace, and it will cause some price discovery at significantly lower levels than they currently are at, which is causing a lot of buyers who may otherwise make decisions to sit on the fence and wait for the event. Timing a market is incredibly difficult. The best in the world can't do it. So one of the things that's unique about the Whistler and Pemberton marketplace is there's very limited supply. Despite all of this drop in activity, there's been no increase in the number of listings in the last 6 months. Listings are still at really historical levels. And if you're looking to buy something, there may still only be 2 or 3 opportunities. Where you see significant price drop as a result of price discovery is where there's a rapidly increasing number of listings, people wanting to sell. Quite frankly, there's fewer buyers, but there's way fewer sellers too. And most people are waiting for some clarity going forward. And I think that's going to be something that's going to happen for a while, is that people are going to wait for a signal, per se, to say, now it's time for me to buy. because whatever uncertainty is in the marketplace has disappeared. Well, I have found over my time here that that's a mistake. That you should, if you see something you like, make an offer. In this marketplace anyways, there isn't going to be a replacement for it in 6 months. And quite frankly, in the Whistler marketplace in particular, there isn't a lot of panic selling. There hasn't been. The only time we saw a lot of panic selling in Whistler was in the 2008, 2009 recession. And that was because the valuations were being created through some real estate-based mortgage products that created prices that were way too high. And that's why real estate reacted. But in other recessions, real estate has never really dropped significantly, particularly in an area with that, quite honestly, caters to a lot of pretty wealthy people who don't necessarily get scared because of some volatility in financial markets or economic markets.
Exactly.
So it's going to be for you and me, it's going to be a little harder. But for the average property owner, I don't expect them to be seriously impacted. There will be what I call some of that needs-based selling at some point, probably I think in the fall or maybe in the winter if we have a second wave, because employment will start to be impacted and tourism, which is so important to our area, will start to. I think there's a lot of people thinking that by the winter, our tourism numbers will start to show some improvement. And so if you're doing Airbnb or rental properties, you'll be able to hang on until then, or you'll make it to then. And so we do see people doing things like turning their Airbnbs into long-term rentals until next winter. So, should we have a second wave and that not happen, then perhaps there might be, and that's a big word. Put big italics, there might be some more needs-based type selling, but it doesn't typically happen here. So if you're a buyer, be aware that there are no more listings today than there were 2 months ago. And the better properties, there is pent-up demand for the better properties and the better opportunities, and they are selling quickly, and particularly well located on the benchlands. So benchlands prices are creeping up on a dollar per square foot basis. Aspens, Woodrun, Painted Cliff, they're all well over $1,000 a foot, which, by the way, is still incredibly good value when measured against our peer group and other mountain resorts like Vail, Park City. If you're looking for a mountain property, Whistler is still pretty good value in US dollar terms. So, once those people start coming across the border again, given some of the other things that are happening, I could see some more buyers into the marketplace fairly quickly. The other thing that's encouraging is I was on a call this morning with some brokers from across the country, Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, Edmonton, Calgary, Victoria. Most of those markets have seen a significant uptick in activity in their marketplaces. Have seen a significant uptick in activity in their marketplaces, and they are very positive about going forward. Despite the various media experts, creating this fear in the marketplace, the average purchaser at 2.5% interest rates and with a bunch of extra money in their pocket because they haven't anything to spend it on in the last 2 months is out looking, and they're making deals. Ottawa, very busy. Montreal, the broker I talked to there, he said his biggest scare is his biggest concern right now is that people aren't taking the fact that we're still in COVID seriously. And they are back, 20 people showing up to open houses at the same time kind of thing. Edmonton's busy. The only market that isn't is Calgary, and that's because Calgary hasn't opened up yet. Victoria is improving. So I think that there's signs that as we relax business and as we relax access to communities, that it's going to start to build with increased demand. And that in a micro market like Whistler, as soon as more people can come up the highway, I've always been a big believer that we are a direct function of the number of visitors we get. And as soon as we get more visitors, we'll get more buyers. And that seems to be the way we're headed. You told me that the bike park is looking to open in the summer. That's obviously a major draw for our community. We may not be able to do as many special events, but Whistler's a great place to just come and hang out And I think we're going to see a lot of people, and I'm hearing this from people. They're saying, "Well, we're going to make our trip to Whistler because we think it's going to be a good place to go. We think it's going to be good value, and it's certainly not staying in the city for the weekend." So, we don't need a big percentage. If 100,000 people come up over the summer, we only need 50 of them to think that maybe they want to make an investment in Whistler, and our market is probably accelerating.
Yeah. Yeah. No, if you look at sort of some of the people I've talked to recently, just to your earlier point, I think that buyers are starting to poke their head out of the sand a little bit at this point. Now that the restrictions are lifting, and I've had a bunch of phone calls from people that are ready to do something, and especially in Pemberton too. Folks are looking to, get to perhaps a safer location, wide open spaces, things like that. So we've had quite a few phone calls lately, and I'm speaking to other agents as well, not only from our company, but it seems like showings just in the past week have perked way up. Yeah. On all properties.
If you look at the total number of listings in Pemberton right now, there's 60 total listings in the entire marketplace. That's, and if you cut it into single family homes, properties with acreages, condos and townhouses, and you're looking to buy something, prices have not gone up. They don't appear to be going down. And if you're looking to do something, you're going to have to, make decisions. Waiting to see what's going to happen. It's certainly the safe way to go, and it may cause you to miss an opportunity. I guess that's what I'm saying, is that, yes, it's conservative, and yes, there's people saying that things could get worse. And I would suggest that, the psychology of the marketplace is a bit fragile, and it would not take much, another wave of COVID, some other event, to perhaps back buyers off even further. But subject to not receiving any new negative news, real news, not somebody's speculation about what's going to happen, that the markets will continue to improve from the levels they're at now. Will we get back to where we were in January or December of last year? Probably not right away. I know Dr. Henry talks about 80% of normal. I'll take that over 30% of where we were at, which is where we're at now. So I'd be very happy with 80% of normal.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting time. I think that you've also, I've been working with quite a few US buyers, and they're just waiting for the border to open. And they're ready to go. We've been online looking at a bunch of options. We've narrowed things down, and they just need to get across the border. Yeah. And they're ready to go.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. I think it was a little unfortunate that they decided to extend that from an economic point of view. They tried to, particularly for Whistler, because we do depend on that rubber tire trade coming out of the Pacific Northwest. And they're big loyalists of our resort, and their dollar's at $1.35 right now, or $1.36. Yeah, they have a huge advantage financially. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the strongest stock market in the last little while has been the tech stock market, or the NASDAQ. And all the tech stocks have done extremely well over the last little while. So given that Seattle and the Pacific Northwest are a tech hub, there's some money being made down there, and most of them love Whistler. So, again, it doesn't take, I don't know how many people work for Amazon, Microsoft, all those companies down in the Seattle area, but we don't need a whole lot of them to decide that maybe a little place in Whistler is really what they'd like to have to get out of the city. And as soon as that border, I think you're right, as soon as that border opens, there'll be a lot of people poking around and asking questions and looking for opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a flood, but traditionally we're what, like between 15 and call it 20% of our purchasers come out of the States. But it's if there's a bit of pent up demand there, that'll impact things for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that buyers, for our marketplace, and maybe not so much for Pemberton, which is more of a typical suburban marketplace where people are going through the housing cycle. Yeah. But for Whistler, there's a longer incubation period anyways. They need to really feel comfortable with what they're doing. We're still answering questions about, is there a speculation tax in Whistler? And I remember when that was the most important question we had to answer to the customer, but now, oh no, that's not even on the table anymore. Nobody's even talking about it. But there is a longer incubation period, and it usually takes some sort of a trigger for people to make a decision after they've been looking for 3 years. And, you phone every week and say, is there anything new, Dean, that you can show me? I'm coming up next week. And you're rinse and repeat for, 3 years, part of the process. But there's triggers out there now: good exchange rate, low interest rates, banks ready to lend money, obviously some personal judgment issues regarding safety of small towns, which is fairly clear that the small towns have been much safer places to be than the cities. It may not be a river, but it'll certainly be some sort of increase in flow, and I think that's it's just back to the old days, back to doing the job and working it out, pricing intelligently, marketing intelligently, being accessible, being good value, and there'll be buyers.
Yeah, it's we've spent this time over the past 2 months retooling a lot of our marketing, and it's been really good. We've dug even deeper into the 360 tours, and we've doubled down on video, and I think it shows. So we're
your stuff
poised.
Is excellent. I think you're doing a bang up job. I hear you get the shameless plug for Dean Linnell. Your stuff is really good, and I think it's the way we're going in the future. I imagine you'll get some imitators over time as we learn these new skills, but at this point your stuff is cutting edge. So you're doing the right things, in my opinion.
It's good. It raises everyone's level, and I think that's what's needed in the real estate industry for sure.
Increased professionalism and sensitivity to the customer's needs. That's what's important.
Yeah. Now let's talk about golf. I heard the golf course is open.
I understand all the Whistler golf courses are now open. Nicholas opens, I think, Friday, 22nd.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
For members, maybe just for members, but I know the Fairmont and the Whistler course are both open to the public. Big Sky and Pemberton are open. Big Sky with guests. You have to be with a member. And they all have protocols. Tee times are 15-minute spreads, and you can't go and hang out and have a beer after a round right now. But I expect that now that the restaurants are opening, that'll get relaxed.
Yeah.
And the courses, all I'm hearing are the courses are in fabulous shape. We're very fortunate. They all came through the winter pretty well.
You've had a couple of rounds at Big Sky so far?
I've had 3.
Good.
Not as many as everybody else, but I've had a lot of Zoom meetings. I don't know. But I'm hoping to play tomorrow, weather permitting. But if you're a golfer, and as we know, Pemberton has been crazy with bikers coming up, despite the community being a bit concerned about that. There's lots of biking in the community. So, I haven't heard if any, but what if any of the restaurants are planning on doing any seating going forward. I know mile 1 you can sit down outside. I haven't heard about the other ones, but everything's slowly relaxing, and it's obviously a day-by-day thing. And just like our office, if there's a bit of a reversal, we may change what we're doing. But I think finally people are allowed to get outside and do stuff, and I think they're very happy to do so. And I think Whistler's well positioned and Pemberton well positioned to lever that successfully, particularly in real estate.
Yeah. Well, I think Whistler and Pemberton, there couldn't really have been a better place to weather out the pandemic. I mean, my life has been impacted, certainly, but I've gotten work done. I've been at home, had lots of great family time, and about the worst thing that's happened is a 5-minute wait to get into the grocery store a couple days a week.
Yeah, as locals, just not only being locals in Whistler Pemberton, but I think being in British Columbia as well.
Yeah.
Our approach to this thing, despite the fact that it's been perhaps more or less difficult for different groups of people, the results speak for themselves. Clearly, you and I, we're fortunate to live in Pemberton, and as you say, when you hear these stories about the lineups and some of the interactions that are going on between people, you sort of scratch your head and say, boy, not happening around here. So, you know, you do end up feeling pretty happy that you can sit on your deck and sit outside and look at the mountains and the trees and not have to worry about some of these issues that seem to be occurring in the city. I haven't been down to the city for 2 months, so I can't really speak to, you know, what it actually looks like. I've only been able to get it sort of anecdotally from people I know that work downtown. But yeah, no, that's another thing that I think is important to keep in mind, is that this area has handled this probably as well as any in North America. It's a safe, easily accessible place to get to. Maybe too accessible in some people's opinion, but I certainly wouldn't have traded it for the last 2 months.
No, I think that the response to the pandemic by the BC government has been spectacular, and I think that everything was handled really well. I mean, it's not over, obviously, but it's been handled exceptionally well, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing talking across the country, is that this is the concern now, is that it isn't over. There's still procedures and protocols. You know, we know in our business that, you know, if people, we're going to, you know, there's still a need to probably be informing people that there's a potential for contact tracing, that masks and gloves and proper procedures when looking at a home are going to be required. You know, it isn't going to be business the way it was, but there is still business. And so the big fear is that we move too quickly. I know I'm starting to sound like Dr. Henry, but we don't want to move so quickly that we put ourselves backwards. That being said, it's easier today than it was a month ago. I can assure you that, and that's a good thing. And I think, you know, by the middle of June will be another step forward. So that'll be good.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks very much for coming on, Pat. That was awesome to have you again.
You know, hopefully we can talk in a month and it'll even be better news.
Yeah, and maybe we'll even be face to face in the office.
Well, that requires way more sophisticated video equipment, doesn't it?
Multicam.
Yeah, multicams and speakers and all that sort of stuff. Thanks, Dean. Appreciate it.
Okay, bud. Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.